William Wilberforce sums up the Moravians in this way. He says that they are a body of people who have perhaps excelled all mankind in solid and unequivocal proofs of the love of Christ and ardent, active zeal in his service. It is a zeal supported by a courage which no danger can intimidate and a quiet certainty that no hardship can exhaust. This is the faith that you and I are called to. The faith that is fully convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that with Jesus Christ in charge of our life, there is no storm too fierce, no mountain too high, no valley too low, no opponent too great, no crisis too difficult. There is no battle on the face of this earth that you cannot handle with Jesus in your life. Now this is where we have to pause, take a step back. Because I'm keenly aware of some of the struggles that you all are facing today. So I need to make sure you understand that I'm not saying that this means everything in life is going to be easy. I'm not saying that there will be absolutely no difficulty in your life. I'm not saying that once you accept Jesus into your life, that everything becomes blue skies, smooth sailing, and cute puppy dogs. Never once does Jesus promise us that we would not face battles in this life. He never once promised us that we would not face the storms of illness, pain, suffering, financial woe, heartbreak, the loss of loved ones. The gospel story confirms that Jesus himself went through very real storms. The storm didn't just blow around his boat because he was on board. It hit him full force. So Jesus' promise is not to steer us around the storms of life, but that he will rather bring us confidently through every storm that we face, still in one piece. P-E-A-C-E. Aren't you glad? Aren't you glad that when we experience these trials, these struggles, these difficulties in life, that we will never go through them alone? We have a friend in Jesus. Jesus is the expert communicator. Me, on the other hand, not so much. Do you ever have trouble communicating effectively? I know I do, and I've discovered over the years that a lot of times when I have trouble communicating effectively, a big reason for that is because I wasn't a very good listener from the beginning. Let me give you an example. Years ago, I experienced what is my single most embarrassing moment in ministry. And it was because of poor communication skills on my part. I had been visiting one of our church members for a long time. They had been hospitalized for a long time. And her name was Joy, but she was anything but. Our time together generally consisted of us sitting together in a dark, drab room while she shared with me how terrible her life really was. And I would leave our time together every time feeling exhausted and depressed, but convinced and determined that the next time would be different. It never was. Eventually, I began to dread our times together, and I didn't like feeling that way. So I specifically set aside an entire afternoon so that I could spend all that time with her. We were going to talk, and I was going to make her feel better and smile whether she liked it or not. When I entered Joy's hospital room, it looked as though a transformation of sorts was already in place. The lights were on, the windows were open, sunlight was beaming into the room. She wasn't in her bed. In fact, she was sitting in a chair quietly talking with the nurse. So I walked in, I placed my hand gently on her shoulder, and I asked her how she was doing. She greeted me with a weak smile and said, "It's a bad time." And this was the attitude. This was the attitude that I had grown accustomed to, but this time I was prepared, and I was ready, and I was determined. So without missing a beat, and in my most pastorally of voices, I said, "Joy, I know it's been a bad time for you. I know it's been a rough season, but why don't we spend the afternoon together talking about this bad time?" It was at this point that the nurse reached over and tugged on my jacket, leaned in and whispered into my ear, "She's trying to tell you that she's on the pot." It was at this moment that I realized that the chair that Joy had been sitting in was really nothing more than 4 legs and a toilet seat, and I had indeed arrived at a very bad time. And she tried to tell me. She tried to tell me, but I wasn't listening. Has God ever tried to tell you something, but you weren't listening? As Christians, we must listen for that still small voice, that assuring voice that amidst the storms of everyday life, with Jesus in charge, all will be well. Communication with our Father in heaven is essential, and it includes setting aside time in your life to do nothing else but listen for the voice of God.